Trade barometer turns red. Europe and Canada retaliate. The global trade barometer has officially turned red. Both Brussels and Ottawa have pressed the second phase retaliation button simultaneously. President Trump's 30% tariff wall has now triggered a counterforce worth over $150 billion, made of steel, aluminum, and diplomatic resolve. On one side, the European Union's expanded list of 90 items now ranges from Boeing jets to Kentucky bourbon. On the other, Canada is targeting U.S. industrial supply chains from Detroit's sheet metal to Alabama's aluminum. So, the key question remains, will Washington retreat from its tariff wall or raise it even higher at the cost of locking in its own industries? In this video, we break down Trump's aggressive tariff move, the fast-building retaliation from Europe and Canada, and the real economic consequences that may follow for U.S. businesses.
If you found this video insightful, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Stay tuned for more updates and content. We've got plenty more coming your way.
Europe's shockwave, from aircraft to alcohol. That fateful July morning, a silent line of tension stretched from Brussels to Washington. While the U.S. was still reeling from Trump's tariff shock, the European Commission released a cryptic one-sentence update. Beneath the steel rhetoric was a second wave of retaliation, this time expanding the hit list from $24.5 billion to a total of nearly $84 billion in goods. This marks a staggering escalation, building a crossfire zone now valued at over $108.5 billion. Among the EU's new targets, Boeing passenger aircraft, Honeywell avionics systems, California-made processing equipment, Detroit-built SUVs, Kansas wheat, and, symbolically, bourbon and rum. These alcohol additions were not accidental. They were aimed at the political heart of U.S. agriculture and beverage industry lobbies, a warning shot to the Senate's corridors. Once ratified by the Commission's Trade Policy Committee, exporters could face up to 35% tariffs at European ports. The real message, if you build a wall, we'll build a tower. Boeing and Honeywell in Europe's crosshairs. Europe's response isn't just about numbers, it's surgical. Boeing and Honeywell now stand at the center of a geopolitical battlefield. For Boeing, a 35% EU tariff could decimate its European order book. Aircraft leases happen in Dublin, spare parts are warehoused in Amsterdam, and repairs take place in Hamburg. That entire pipeline now faces existential threat. At Honeywell's Arizona R&D Center, the worry is equally intense. With European avionics already closing the performance gap, a tariff surge could deliver a final blow, pushing deals to EU competitors. U.S. Senate offices are reportedly being flooded with letters from workers, engineers, and industry groups. The pressure on Washington is rising. Detroit's wake-up call. The auto war escalates. The auto sector is feeling the squeeze from both sides. The EU's new tariff list specifically targets electric SUVs, pickups, and luxury internal combustion vehicles, products central to Detroit's exports. Should the EU proceed to its third phase of retaliation, an extra 20% tariff will hit, potentially wiping out America's competitiveness in the EU auto market. Meanwhile, Canada is delivering its own hammer blow. Just 48 hours after unveiling a $15.6 billion steel and aluminum tariff cap, Ottawa introduced a second $40 billion retaliation draft. It covers machinery, automotive components, electronics, and household goods. One clause stands out: a 50% trigger tax if U.S. imports exceed Canada's steel and aluminum quota. This mechanism could add $400 to $500 per ton of U.S. steel, squeezing profits and pushing Canadian buyers toward alternative sources like Brazil, South Korea, or Australia. No more WTO referees. Retaliation becomes the rule previously. Disputes like this would have been mediated by the World Trade Organization. But the WTO's appellate body remains paralyzed. With no international referee in sight, open retaliation has become the rule, not the exception. Brussels and Ottawa have built a $150 billion circle of pressure that compresses Trump's trade wall from both sides. U.S. producers are caught in the crosshairs. In Windsor, Canada, warehouses scramble to stockpile U.S. steel ahead of Ottawa's ceiling. Customs cracked down, calling it artificial stockpiling, and imposed retroactive inspections. With that loophole closed, U.S. producers face a stark choice: move production to Canada or watch their market share vanish. The green card. Carbon taxes as trade leverage beyond the numbers, a deeper strategic shift is underway. Canada and the EU are weaponizing climate policy. In Canada, Ottawa's steel and aluminum sectors now benefit from green financing and low-carbon credentials, thanks in part to Quebec's hydroelectric advantage. European buyers are already looking to Canadian aluminum as a cleaner alternative. Similarly, the EU's Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, set to launch in 2026, will impose additional fees on high-emission imports, including engines, electronics, and machinery. American exporters now face not only tariffs, but also carbon penalties. Political blowback. The White House under siege. Washington is facing internal fractures. Boeing's $110 billion European backlog is under threat. Honeywell could lose $2 billion a year in R&D funding. Detroit's SUV market share in Europe might fall from 18% to just 7%. Kentucky bourbon and Tennessee corn could be pushed off European shelves. Senators from Ohio, Michigan, and Arizona are already raising red flags. Farmers, factory workers, engineers, they're all asking if the protectionist wall is worth the rising costs. Rewriting the map, a global trade reset. As the dust settles, new trade routes are being drawn. Canadian aluminum is flowing into Europe. Brazilian sheet metal is being rerouted to Canada. South Korean electronic steel is heading to EU ports. Climate policy, customs tariffs, and logistics have merged into a new trade logic. America's walls are birthing new corridors without its participation. Banks in Toronto are financing Canada's industrial expansion. EU engineers are recalibrating their supply chains away from the US, and investors are betting on low-carbon factories, not tariff-walled exports. Closing thoughts. The curtain will fall, but on whom? So who will crack first? Trump's White House or the global coalition of trade retaliation? Will the decisive blow come from Seattle's aviation industry, Ohio's automakers, or the Senate's corn and whiskey bloc? Brussels is ready with its third-phase tariffs. Ottawa's $40 billion retaliation draft is one signature away from law. This isn't a trade spat, it's a layered, calculated maneuver shaping the next decade of global commerce. What's your take on this escalating trade war?
If you found this video insightful, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Stay tuned for more updates and content. We've got plenty more coming your way.